Hello, I'm Kevin Struthers. Welcome to the inaugural session of the Kennedy Center Book Club and today's discussion of Jazz by Toni Morrison. I'm one of the directors of programming here at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. Before we get started, I wanted to take a brief moment to, as always, say thank you. Thank you to all of you, our Kennedy Center patrons, for your continued support of our programming and educational activities. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you. And for all of the jazz fans out there, please keep an eye for an announcement about the Kennedy Center's 2021-2022 jazz season. including special concerts for our 50th anniversary. Now, just a few days ago on May 1st, we had an amazing performance online from our Opera House, an onstage performance titled An Evening of Jazz and Dance, and it featured artists Porter and Tyler Peck with choreography by the wonderful Alonzo King. It's available on our website for free through August 1st at kennedy-center.org, so we hope that you can check that out. Now, as for our next session of Book Club, I wanted to give you a heads up that registration is already open. It's Tuesday, August 17th, and the topic will be the book, The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man by James Weldon Johnson, with a panel host, Mark Turner, and scholar Imani Perry. For your copy of the James Weldon Johnson book, thank you for considering a visit to a local DC bookshop, including Loyalty Bookstores, Mahogany Books, and Sankofa. But for now, for Jazz by Toni Morrison, I will turn things over to our host for this evening, whose idea it was to start the Kennedy Center Book Club. And he had a busy moment during the pandemic, feeling the love of Toni Morrison. He actually recorded some music. You just heard a song called Toni Morrison Said Black is a Rainbow from Jason's most recent album, The Sound Will Tell You, available on Bandcamp, and it was released during the pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our artistic director for Jazz, Jason Moran.
Hey, Jazz for real. Thank you, Kevin. And also thank you for everyone for joining us on what is sure to be an enlightening conversation about this great novel by one of the greatest authors ever, Toni Morrison. And I would like to invite my panelists in just so that we can keep the ball rolling. We have Dr. Elizabeth Alexander. She's a poet, an educator, and memoirist, and the cultural advocate who has served as the president of the Mellon Foundation since 2018 and a two-time finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Dr. Alexander, hello.
Hello, hello.
And we have Dianne Reeves, composer, band leader, vocalist, multi-Grammy Award winning, and recently inducted NEA Jazz Master from Denver. Dianne Reeves, hello.
How are you doing today? I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm a little bit, yeah. I feel a little bit too excited because this book has charged me over the past year and a half. And there was something about the book and something about how she dives into the story or the melody that I said, oh, I need to talk about this with some people who know more. And so I'm glad that you both joined me today. And I wanted to start with a few quotes of Toni Morrison talking about music. She says, I thought of myself as like the jazz musician, someone who practices and practices and practices in order to be able to invent and to make his art look effortless and graceful. I was always conscious of the constructed aspect of the writing process, and that art appears natural and elegant only as a result of constant practice and awareness of its formal structures. You must practice thrift in order to achieve that luxurious quality of wastefulness, that sense that you have enough to waste, that you are holding back without actually wasting anything. And I think about like how, Elizabeth works as a poet, right? Like the thrift of the space, of the language, how Dianne, how you come back at the end after the piano solo to now expand on that piano solo before bringing that melody back in. Like, what does it mean, when she talks about this thrift, but this ability to practice to then distribute as if the well is always full?
Well, I love, how she just states the melody in the beginning. We know what it's going to be. She gathers you in the room. This is how we're going to go. And then continuously does a variation on that theme. And it gets richer and deeper. And the thing that I love about that is, I didn't know about this thing that she had written, but that's what it felt like I just started hearing music. Some of the things I thought I wanted to sing, because I could just, it was after I realized what was going on between going in and out of time and, changing all of the different things, that happens on stage. That's like, I thought about that as, how memory comes, or might play a line of somebody that, came before us, or, you might, the piano player will answer you, or your musicians will answer you in a certain way that inspires another way to go down the same conversation. I mean, it's just all of those things.
Yeah.
And I think also the ability to practice thrift comes from having so much to distill it from.
Yeah.
So I was thinking a lot about Toni Morrison in time, that Toni Morrison is a 19th century, 20th century, and 21st century artist, literally. Because when you look at when she was born, she knows people from the 19th century. She knows people who are emancipated people. And she reaches all the way forward. She knows the industry of being Depression era. And she talked about that. I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is that Toni Morrison, and if you look at the dates, she starts with Bluest Eye, 1970, Sula, 1975, Song of Solomon, 77, Tar Baby, 81, 87, Beloved, 92, Jazz. Okay, so I could have stopped at any of those points because she could be done after the Bluest Eye. But let me fold into that she is working and single mothering. The second child is born in 1965. The children aren't out of the house when most of these books are written, and she is working full time. And as she famously has said, risen before the dawn to write into the light. And she's always got a lot of jobs, she says, because she said, I'm a Depression era person. We work. And I also think, in thinking about this sense of time and memory and history, that she's also kind of a late bebopper, so that sense of coming forward with velocity. She is a child of the Great Migration. Her family's burned out of Alabama. Her mother says, Daddy, we're going, be on that train. I'm on that train with the children, catch that train or you won't see us again. That's her actual mother. Lived experience. And then they go to Ohio and thinking about, Charlie Parker, and thinking about, like Kansas City, thinking about Miles, East St. Louis, thinking about those folks who are out of the deep South, but are propelled with the memory and the history and, the blood memory, which, like Alvin Ailey said, he put into Revelations.
Right.
So I think that, like, just that capacity, holy Moses, to have all that and then to cut away to the essence is truly, truly awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. She says this thing about listening to, well, she said that, she had a deep, most profound love for Keith Jarrett. And then she backs it up also into Miles Davis. She says, there's something so intimate and relatable to me. And listening to that is almost like reading. It's like reading. It is the same sort of deep, profound pleasure that one gets from either writing or reading. I want my language to have a sound, to have a rhythm, to have a color, to have all of these things without being decorative.
Yes.
Right.
Like kitsch.
Yes.
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 I don't want it to be flowery, and then she says this thing in The Source of Self-Regard. Her final essay is about invisible ink, which kind of like both Invisible Ink, that essay, and this book were my like dawn of pandemic time. And because I couldn't trust what I was seeing on the news. And so in those moments, I just retreated to reading Morrison because I was like, okay, well, at least I could trust this. But she says, writing the reading involves seduction, luring the reader into environments outside the pages, disqualifying the notion of a stable text for one that is dependent on an active and activated reader who is writing the reading. So given what she says about seducing the reader, can we listen to Toni Morrison read these pivotal opening paragraphs of Jazz?
Yes.
I know that woman. She used to live with a flock of birds on Lenox Avenue. Know her husband, too. He fell for an 18-year-old girl with one of those deep-down spooky loves that made him so sad and happy he shot her just to keep the feeling going. When the woman, her name is Violet, went to the funeral to see the girl and to cut her dead face, they threw her to the floor and out of the church. She ran then through all that snow, and when she got back to her apartment, she took the birds from their cages and set them out the windows to freeze or fly, including the parrot that said, "I love you." The snow she ran through was so windswept, she left no footprints in it, so for a time, nobody knew exactly where on Lenox Avenue she lived. But like me, they knew who she was, who she had to be, because they knew that her husband, Joe Trace, was the one who shot the girl. There was never anyone to prosecute him because nobody actually saw him do it. And the dead girl's aunt didn't want to throw money to helpless lawyers or laughing cops when she knew the expense wouldn't improve anything. Besides, she found out that the man who killed her niece cried all day. And for him and for Violet, that is as bad as jail.
Oh,
Great, gracious.
Yeah. I think when I first read this, I just wrote every student I had, and I was like, "This is how we should be making intros."
yes.
This is how it's supposed to jump out into an audience. I mean, that's the goal for me. When you all read that opening, can you remember what you felt?
Well, there were so many things, already you want to know, first of all, who is this Violet person? Why would she do that? Joe Trace and the fact that, her aunt, feels like, he's done his penance, by, crying and grieving. And this is her niece that was killed. And then the bird that's out on the windowsill saying, "I love you." It was like, okay, I'm ready. I think for so much.
And every single sentence unto itself is a story or could catapult you into a story. Yeah. Every single sentence gives you a universe that asks a question. She used to live with a flock of birds on Lenox Avenue. How many questions do you have coming out of that? The Morrisonian sense that is just so deep black of, how we live in a world where, a bird could say, "I love you," where someone could live with birds, where, think about all that's in the phrase where she went to cut the girl's dead face. Mm-hmm. So, behind that, how much story is behind that. So I think, you want to go forward, but also I just have to say and this back to a point that we were discussing before, the richness that never boils over. Mm-hmm. Richness to the nth degree, but it never becomes too sweet, too much, but it fills up to as much as Black life fills up, which is enormous. I think also, because I thought about that and later on wanted to look at the ending, thinking about you all as artists, thinking about how do you come on stage and how do you leave stage and how do you open a song and how do you close a song? Do you hit it right away? Do you count down? Do you vamp till ready? How do you start? And Toni Morrison, and you can't hear it so well always in the recording, but she starts with the teeth suck. She starts with, right. S-T-H.
STH.
And so I think that, which to me is like the most ancient of Black women's sounds, one that has lost its potency through generations, but that also takes us back to Africa, and it's still here and it's still useful. To start with that, which is, it's an opener. I know that girl.
Yeah.
And so I wonder for both of you, how do you think about that opening when you think about how to start?
For me, I just think about mine is the walk. I'm here.
Yes.
And when, you know, and also, you know, when I'm starting, I really try to create an atmosphere, a moment of focus, you know, because I have a lot to say. And it's interesting what you were saying about, you know, how every sentence has a question and there's so much under it. And I was thinking about that because, you know, like, you know, with you playing, Jason, when I'm singing, there's always this subtext that nobody knows really what that is. You know, because we're singing the song, but they feel things and they're allowed to, you know, but for me, Toni Morrison allows you to know what that is, you know, she writes about what that is. And it's really, really powerful. She's saying the things that we try to help you to feel, you know, when we're playing, but she's saying it. She's telling you, this is why I'm singing this lyric. This is why I'm writing this line. This is why I'm, you know. And that's really, really powerful to me.
Yeah, you know, I think when I was first reading it, I was trying to read it in my head, and then I read it out loud, and I was like, "Ooh, this makes much more sense."
Yeah.
You know, and she says this thing about kind of like about I can't find my papers now. Oh, she says, you know, there's a melody here called the plot, and I wanted to hear that plot as a melody. Manipulated in performance, you know, and it's interesting if you listen to the audiobook of her reading it, it's not what's on the page, meaning she's adding all of that, you know, all that Louis Armstrong and Billie Holiday does, there's no comma there, but she's added this space just in that one space between face and you know, and so she somehow finds like gravity in phrases, but she says, this other, as I say, unspeakable things unspoken. As you can tell, I just been reading. I knew I was writing a second novel. She's talking about Sula. I knew I was writing a second novel, and that it too would be about people in a Black community, not just foregrounded, but totally dominant, and that it was about Black women, also foreground and dominant. The threshold between the reader and the Black topic text need not be the safe, welcoming lobby I persuaded myself it needed to be at that time. My preference was for the demolition of the lobby altogether. As can be seen from The Bluest Eye, and in every book I have written, only Sula has this entrance. The others refuse the quote-unquote presentation, refuse the seductive safe harbor, the line of demarcation between the sacred and the obscene, the public and the private, them and us. And there's something about the way she says demolishing the lobby of our very being, you know, and then that there to get rid of the how it's presented. That I feel that when we travel the world, exporting this music, exporting these experiences, these collective experiences as bands, collective experiences with our audiences that have trust that we have something to share that is as potent as anything their grandmother has sung for them, that it gets very, very, actually it gets really scary in that moment, Elizabeth, when you start a song. It is not like immediate. So when Dianne talks about when I walk onto the stage, because she does come on the stage with a beautiful dress on, with a band already cooking, and she's ready to now let's set the table, and I'm ready to now give you this buffet. It is major, you know, talking about how bands walk onto the stage, how bands count things off, you know, or not, you know. That's been a real study, I feel like, that she sets up. She's like, nah, this is how this band works. Joe, Dorcas, Violet, they roll like this.
And I think also, you know, when you look at, the Beloved and then Jazz and then Paradise are what she called the Beloved trilogy, and she wanted those books to be read together. And so I think also thinking about beginnings and endings, you know, the beginning of Beloved, 124 was spiteful, full of a baby's venom. Okay, and then we go into the, you know, unimaginable world of Beloved. But, you know, she says that what she is trying to have us understand in these three books, thinking about in various ways love in a Black historical moment, that she wants us, and I brought this quote, she said, the books are about search for the beloved, the part of you that is you and loves you and is always there for you. And so then the book Beloved ends with, it was not a story to be passed on, because she's gone all the way into, the deepest horror, that, could you live in conditions that would cause you to kill your own child rather than suffer, slavery, but how, the ghost comes back. And so I started thinking that we're sort of catapulted from the end, the last word of beloved is beloved, into this story in the Harlem Renaissance, into this story where, it must be Joe Trace who says, like, I was always a new Negro, but where these people are in a Harlem and in a music that is making itself anew, but again, with all that it brings with it, with all, there are so many, and I think this would be looking back to the beginning as well. There are so many blues stories.
Yes.
I mean, so many low down blues stories. Yeah. But of course, those stories, come from people's lives, and come from people who are a generation barely removed from property, terrorized from the South that they come from or aren't able to leave. And then, to what you pointed out, Jason, about, the city as a character, as a force in this book, to the city, which is magical and energized and, many, many things. But it's also, in the midst of all of that, there are the stone-faced people in the street marching up Fifth Avenue. There are the race riots. There are your folks, James Reese Europe. There are people coming back from the war, which again back to Sula, and starting with the character Shadrach, who in World War I saw someone's head blown off, and the man kept running after his head had been shot off. And so Shadrach, of course, it's more than just he wasn't ever right. Like, it's deeper than that. And so all of this people bring with them. You remind me that she talks about, like, wanting to write this novel from seeing or hearing James Van Der Zee talk about a photograph he had taken of a corpse that he used to take a series of photographs of Harlem corpses. And so this photo talks about this girl at a Harlem rent party, and she gets stabbed, but her friends see that she's sick, and they take her to the room, and they say, "Who did this to you?" And she says, "I'll tell you tomorrow."
Right.
So that the ex-lover could get away. So like the way that she describes some of these rooms, the way James Van Der Zee himself, as an icon of photography, has also captured, uptown, on the street and in the homes, and the imaginings he does of those ghostly like figures that are in his photographs. It just makes it, like all of a sudden are pulled into these worlds where Toni then writes about the light in the room. Maybe I'll read just a little bit about the city, because the city is the other character that lets all this happen. It says, "I'm crazy about the city. Daylight slants like a razor, cutting the building in half. In the top half, I see looking faces, and it's not easy to tell which are people, which the work of stonemasons. Below is shadow, where any blasé thing takes place. Clarinets and lovemaking, fists and the voices of sorrowful women. A city like this, one makes me dream tall and feel in on things. Hep. It's right still, rocking above the shade below that does it. When I look over strips of green grass lining the river and church steeples and into the cream and copper halls of apartment buildings, I am strong, alone, yes, but top notch and indestructible." And there was something of reading that during a New York pandemic. Yeah. Alone,
Right.
There's nobody on the street. There was just too much of it that was, right,
real.
But it was very real. But how she describes this city,
I think we can all relate, to that. You know, it just, and that was one of the things that would happen while I was reading, especially that passage. Then I end up going back in my memory of when I lived in New York, and I kept having to go, okay, Dianne, put your head back here, because, you know, she sends you on these, you know, you get to go on these places and into these places just because she, you know, brings them to your memory in that way.
I think also, you know, thinking about the city in this moment, absolutely. And also the descriptions, you know, thinking about this conversation over the weekend of the city in the spring with this, you know, with just that, like that incredible life force of New York City in the spring. But I found myself thinking, I can't get over the Great Migration aspects of it. And that she's describing a time when my family came to New York City, you know, one from North Carolina, one from Jamaica, and two from Alabama, literally at this time, grandparents who I knew. And I remember thinking of them as nothing but New Yorkers, which is what they were when I met them. And that it sort of dawned on me, like, wait a minute, these people were in Alabama until, you know, the 1920. You know, all of that came with them. I mean, that meaning many, 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 many things. But all that people brought, you know, wow, you know, this person was in Jamaica until 1918 and then stowed away on a boat. This would be my paternal grandfather on a banana boat, arrived on the docks, and someone came to him and said, I'm taking you to Harlem. And when he told me that story, I said, well, you know, did you know him, Baba? He's like, no, girl, you know, I didn't know him, you know, but chaps came to find us because they didn't want us to think that we could live or work anyplace else but Harlem. And then he said, when I was settled, I went down to the docks to meet people and bring them up. So I think that the language that she brings forward, all of that is extraordinary when you think about how we today, you know, Black people writ large, are products of that complex energy of the Great Migration.
Yeah, it doesn't stop. And you know, I guess while Dianne and I were trading messages, I remember Dianne once, I think you said, you know, like, oh, this is like a Coltrane solo, you know.
I mean, you could listen to Coltrane's music, like in the beginning of the book, you know, I could hear him playing spiritual, you know, how, you know, how it starts, you know, it's like it states everything, you know, and then, you know, and I was like, you know, I could just hear music through the whole time of you know, reading this. You could just feel it moving forward. Yeah, like when they're together, I heard in a sentimental mood, but it would be like they're together, you know, diddle diddle ding, you know, you know, they're together, and you know, Dorcas and Joe Trace, and
I'm glad you said that, because because you in a sentimental mood, the way Ellington and Train play, because what Ellington plays, I think, is extremely weird and totally Ellington, just like the love that Joe and Dorcas have. Like it's like it is like so, you know, like so it's so you know, it's out of proportion, you know. And maybe that's the part that I think makes you love a book like this, is because I trust that as I'm reading from chapter to chapter, and when she does this beautiful thing where she kind of like ends the sentence at one chapter and then starts it, picking up the theme, and then the solo then moves to the next person. And when this happens, that, oh, okay, she's not just leaving me out there, which as an Aquarian, and she is an Aquarian, we can do.
Well, you know, I think that also, you know, just that the you know, jazz as a character, many different kinds of jazz, but also jazz as a music played in places is so I love when, Dorcas says, like, I want you to take me to Mexico. And so at first I'm like, oh, they're going to Mexico.
Right.
And she says, and he says, you can't go to Mexico. That's past your bedtime. And then she says, I want to go to the place with little tables with white tablecloths and lamp shades with little lamp shades on the lamp. I mean, of course, she writes it so much more beautifully. But I loved thinking about, like, where were these people hearing the music in the 1920s? And then the music that's playing in the lowdown party where she gets shot. That's another kind of music that accompanies that drama.
Yeah, for me, there's the music that accompanies the drama, and then the slow motion of all the events that are happening. There's like something else happening. You know what I mean? I hear it's interesting because, one of the things that I see about a lot of the characters, there's this longingness and this wanting to be accepted, especially in Dorcas's character, who really, that character just really has been being with me for a little while now. And just dignity and also identity, she doesn't have any of those kinds of things because, I mean, her background, way that, she ends up with her aunt, and then, her aunt is shielding her when she's a child to keep her safe. And, she just wants to bust out. She wants to, to be somebody. Even in the salon, she's there, but she's not a part of the conversations with anybody. She's always like the shadow.
And so strange.
Yeah.
So strange. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm gonna stop now. So Elizabeth, because I want to hear these next excerpts that we have to during this talk. So maybe Elizabeth, you can share now.
Well, yeah, just a little bit. So, as I was thinking about openings and closings, so we heard her and would not try to, compete with herself. Toni Morrison herself was quite a performer, and I think that I'm going to read this faster than I think she would, imagining it as a standard that you could try at different tempos. But this is how the book closes. I might stop myself because of how the language is arresting. It's nice when grown people whisper to each other under the covers. Okay, full stop, right? Their ecstasy is more leaf sigh than bray, and the body is the vehicle, not the point. They reach grown people for something beyond, way beyond, and way, way down underneath tissue. They are remembering while they whisper the carnival dolls they won and the Baltimore boats they never sailed on. The pears they let hang on the limb because if they plucked them, they'd be gone from there. And who else would see that ripeness if they took it away for themselves? How could anyone passing by see them and imagine for themselves what the flavor would be like? Breathing in and murmuring under covers, both of them have washed and hung out on the line in a bed they chose together and kept together. Never mind, one leg was propped up on a 1916 dictionary and the mattress curved like a preacher's palm, asking for witnesses in his name's sake, enclosed them each and every night and muffled their whispering old-time love. They are undercovers because they don't have to look at themselves anymore. There is no stud's eye, no chippy glance to undo them. They are inward toward the other, bound and joined by carnival dolls and the steamers that sailed from ports they never saw. That is what is beneath their undercover whispers. And so I should say that's actually like penultimate to the end, but just to stop there and to think about how the journey of where we've come across the scope of the book from the opening to the end, it's much more abstract, the ending. I mean, it's describing two human beings who have come back together unto each other. But if you think about that purpose she talked about, sort of turning to within themselves as well. It's a very still moment. It's a very intimate moment that comes away from all the epic openings and promises and grandeur and sweep of that first paragraph. And then I get shall I read the poem?
Yeah.
Well, one.
Are we stopping? Yes.
Because
there's so much happening.
But like what she has, like that they're together under those covers is a kind of a jail that she mentions in the very beginning. Like for him, Violet, that is as bad as jail. That's the last word she just read at the beginning. There's something also about like them, like in a relationship, kind of I can see it as like some, Hollywood ending where they live happily ever after. There's some other kind of like cloud that looms that though they're still able to be intimate with each other and still share space together, but Joe is in another zone. I mean, I wonder where, like people have wondered what happens after Porgy and Bess ends. Like what happens with Joe and Dorcas, like as a couple. Entering this new space, where
with Violet,
yeah, with Violet, yeah, you're right,
violent.
Oh, that was just a mess.
Yeah.
And that's also like her kind of ability is the way. I don't know. I was gonna talk about the way that she uses names, right? Because we think about these names, and she has this. I'm doing all this research about Louis Armstrong right now, and she talks about like nicknames and the need for the nicknames in Black community. She said, well, there's a whole history, I think, in naming in the beginning of Black people being in this country. They lost their names and they were given names by their masters. And so they didn't have names and they began to call one another, decades later by nicknames. I don't think I knew any of my father's friends, male friends, by their real names. I remember them only by their nicknames. And also there was an honesty. Sometimes the names were humiliating, deliberately so. Somebody would pick out your flaw. If you were little, they would call you Shorty. If you were angry, they would call you the devil. I remember a man in the neighborhood who was called Jim the Devil. Always 3 words, Have you seen Jim the Devil? No. And then when you think of musicians, Satchmo, Louis Armstrong, what is Satchmo? That's satchel mouth. Or you think about giving themselves royal names, Duke and Count and King. It's a very personal identification, trying to move away maybe from the history of having no name, fuck me up, and then personalizing it on one hand to give you a name that's embarrassing in order to make you confront it, to deal with now. And then later on, more charming names, moving away from humiliating names like Satchmo. So there's something about the way that even when you have to say as a reader, Joe and Violet, or Violet and Joe, or that moment in the book where she says that Violet,
right, that
Violet that does that,
or
Violet.
how Joe Trace comes up with his last name.
Yes.
The
trace of his mother.
These are it's like they gone without a trace.
Yeah.
And that just has vibration to it, because you're like, now, even just that stopped. Or Hunter's Hunter.
Yeah. Was before Sweetness changed his name from William Younger to Little Caesar. First of all, his name is Sweetness.
And there has been more than one Little Caesar.
Right.
But also Elizabeth, because I think all 3 of us have, and we'll hear Dianne's later, but all 3 of us have found Morrison as also a place to create from, as a way to also use as a catapult to our creativity. So you have a piece you'd like to share.
Well, yeah, this is, so I think of Toni Morrison as, she's the ultimate virtuoso. She's the, if we had to pick one great genius of our time, I think we could, if we could only have one, I think she would do nicely. Thank you very much. And she's so unsparing and excellent, and brave and encompassing. So I also find I met her twice, but didn't know her. But you know, her books deep in me, and I think she's a poet. Like just each of those lines, she is certainly a poet. You know, the stuff that we were talking about in the beginning, the cutting away, but the lushness, holding all of that. So there was something a little scary about the idea of her too, thinking of her as the gold standard when you're making stuff. So this poem is called Toni Morrison Dreams, and it's in dream space, which I think of as Morrisonian space too. So I always say, like, none of these things actually happened, and yet they're all true. 1, Toni Morrison despises conference coffee. So I offer to fetch her a Starbucks macchiato grande with turbinado sugar. She's delighted, can start her day properly, draws on her galoise, shakes her gorgeous pewter dreads, sips the java that I brought her, and reads her own words. Nuns go by as quiet as lust. Everything in silver gray and black. 2, workshop. She asks us to adapt Synge's Playboy of the Western world for the contemporary stage. She asks us to translate the birds. She asks us to think about clocks, see the numbers as glyphs, consider the time we spend watching them, in class, online, at the hairdressers. Mm-hmm. In class, she calls me Ouida, and I answer. I am the yellow mother of 2 yellow boys, she says. I sit up straight. Now the work begins, and oh, the work is hard. 3, she does not love my work, but she loves my baby, tells me to have many more. 4, a reading at Temple University. Love, she wrote, and love, and love, and love, and amanuensis, velvet, pantry, lean, Shadrach, Solomon, Hagar, Jadine, plum, circles, renegade. And then she whispered it, love. Mm. So that's how she's all up in everything, terrifying and empowering. Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great. I mean, yeah, because it somehow, you know, it's like when you, first of all, that she as a maker, just also it's intimidating to read something this good. I gotta say, you know,
yes,
like write something when you turn around, okay, so I'm gonna make something now, you know, like when you when you do that pivot to now, right? So Dianne walks back on stage, you know, knowing what she just read, it reframes, right, how you want to make, you know. But those really jump out, you know, like the mother.
Well, and I mean, like, you know, and you long, like, is she gonna, you know, does she like my work? And she's like, why don't you just have some more babies? I mean, like, cold.
Yeah,
ice cold, but that's the standard.
I'm you know, like, I'm looking in the book because there's parts of it that still, you know, like when you talk about her saying that way, you know, and it shuttles me to I chose you, nobody gave you to me, nobody, and that's the one for you. So, no, nobody said that's the one for you. I picked you out. Wrong time, yep. And doing wrong by my wife, but the picking out, the choosing. Don't ever think I fell for you or fell over you. I didn't fall in love. I rose in it. I saw you and made up my mind. My mind. And this is like a cadenza to, like, you know, like the train at the end of the song when the band stops and he's like, okay, so I got a little bit more to say.
Right.
I love the moment, you know, like these, and when you say, Elizabeth, that she is a poet, there is a part, even when I would be reading this to my students in our blues class, and they'd say, she's a poet. And I guess, you know, there's something that we, you know, that also I guess also for you and for Dianne, people who make and embody lyrics, you know, like how does that, you know, how does she inspire that part of your practice?
Well, the thing is, even in reading this, I had to start reading it like it was a lyric, you know, because any other way I couldn't get through it. You know, I kept going back and I was like, oh, okay, you know, go just feel it, just keep moving forward, you know. And that was a thing that, you know, that actually made me feel like I had a superpower, you know, that I could, you know, feel it in that way, you know. So she addressed that in me.
I think also, you know, it's interesting. She herself was such an extraordinary embodied presence. And I remember someone told me the story when she used to teach, he took a class with her when she was teaching at Howard in the early 1960s. And he took a classics class with her. And he said she would sit on the edge of the teacher's desk and she would lean forward and whisper. And he said, and she would tell us about Clytemnestra. And, you know, and just would tell them stories. And hearing her read that particular reading that actually I did see in real life at Temple University, it was right as Beloved was about to be published. And there were hundreds of pages. I mean, it was like a gymnasium, absolutely packed with human beings. And she whispered that entire reading and the drama.
Yes.
But again, like not like just the full drama that was deserved, because she was reading from Beloved. No one on earth had ever heard anything like that before.
Yeah, that's like it's really unfolding something for the first time.
Listening to her read this book, it was like listening to the first time I ever heard Shirley Horn, because she plays space, you know, time, and paints the picture very clearly and gives you all of this. She puts you in suspended animation, you know. And so listening to her breathe through it, and words that, you know, because she doesn't have enough breath to finish them, it's just, you know, I love all of that.
And I love that you brought in Shirley Horn, who I love so much, because I think that, you know, what does it mean to just take your time, you know, in that way, of course, that in our tradition, when someone's trying, I think there's a take your time in the book, maybe, you know, and like, just take your time, you know, take your time, but to let something be inhabited with its full meaning, and to feel that, you know, people are there to listen to you. You are listened to, which I feel is a very grown woman's thing to understand. I feel like that's a life process, learning to take your space and take your time. Though I think it's something that Shirley Horn and Toni Morrison understood preternaturally, both of them.
And Dianne, you have a piece that we can listen to now. I mean, if you'd like to, we'd love to hear this piece of yours.
Yeah, it's going back to Dorcas. That character really meant a lot to me. I just think about her defining moment when she walks into the first one of those rent parties, and she sees the two dancers who, in my mind, were the Nicholas brothers, because describes them, you know. But how, you know, she's feeling herself, and she catches their eye, and then they, you know, they're looking at her, and she walks through the shadows, and then the one brother leans over to the other while they're smiling and says something. The other looks her up and down, and then they leave. You know, that, you know, just that was, I knew that for her that was a defining moment. You know, that was a moment of how she would now look at herself, and what, you know, was just one of those times when it probably, I just went in. It was just one of those times of, you know, feeling this kind of rejection, and what don't I have, and why she would have maybe gone to Joe Trace, you know. And then the song that you'll hear, it goes back to the end, knowing that Joe Trace is hunting her, or he's coming after her. and then, and feeling him getting closer and closer. And so this song talks about her, what I feel that she thought love was, or what she needed to feel love, that was based off of something that she had never ever really seen or experienced. So her view of love is like really skewed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll hear that now.
Yeah.
I thought I knew the feeling when it started, and when we parted, I felt a pain. But this time something in me sang a plain song. This is the same song it sang. So this is love. This trembling of the heart, the pain when I'm apart from you. Well, I declare, I swear I would have never known that this is love. The thrill of being near, the aching urge to hear you say, you'll be my all. I thought that I had felt all emotions. I thought that I had seen everything. I thought my heart was through with devotions. But then you came along with spring. Oh, so this is love. The aching in my head, the way my face turns red when someone mentions your name. Well, I declare, so this is love.
He's coming for me, maybe tonight, maybe here. If he does, he will look and see how close me and Acton dance, how I rest my head on my arm holding on to him. The hem of my skirt drapes down in the back, taps the calves of my legs while we rock back and forth, then side to side. The whole front of us touches. Nothing can get between us. We are so close. Lots of girls here want to be doing this with him. I can see them when I open my eyes to look past his neck. I rub my thumbnail over his nape so the girls will know I know they want him. He doesn't like it and turns his head to make me stop touching his neck that way. I stop. Joe wouldn't care. I could rub anywhere on him. He let me draw lipstick pictures in places he had to have a mirror to see.
I thought that I had felt all I thought that I had seen everything. I thought my heart was through with devotions. But then you came along with spring. Whoa, so this is love. This aching in my head, the way my face turns red when someone mentions your name. Well, I declare, so this is love.
He's coming for me, and when he does, he will see I'm not his anymore. I'm Acton's, and it's Acton I want to please.
Stunning. So stunning. So stunning. And also Strayhorn in relationship to Morrison, also, right? Like thinking about those two very much of the same cloth, kinds of people who are able to document the places and the people that they see in the smell of a room. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Thank you for that. I'm sorry, I'm lost. Because Dianne, that was stunning. But and right after that, I've called that Dorcas's solo. You know, with this moment. You know, this is her solo. It's her last one. Right. And at the end of that chapter, right? It's the last one. It says, you know, now it's clear through the doorway. I see the table. On it is a brown wooden bowl, flat, low like a tray, full to spilling with oranges. I want to sleep, but it is clear now. So clear, the dark bowl, the pile of oranges, just oranges, bright. Listen, I don't know who is that woman singing, but I know the words by heart. And the next chapter starts, sweetheart. That's what the weather was called, sweetheart weather. Prettiest day of the year. You know, like, you know, even because you know this, Dianne, also in a set, you know, that when you play like a ballad like that, what you've done, you've slowed everybody's heart down when that happens, you know, and we feel that with Dorcas right there on the bed, like the heart is slowing, the things she sees, the things she hears, the things she wants to taste that look like they're full of some like citrus power, but she's like,
and feeling like, you know, this is it. This is, I finally got what I wanted. People can see it, you know, I'm with him, and, you know, with this person who cared nothing about her, but you know, made her feel like she was something and somebody.
And, you know, I think also the way that right there, Toni Morrison, I mean, she's not afraid to have characters speak to us from the dead, in the way that, you know, when Sula dies, she says, it didn't hurt a bit. Wait till I tell Nell. You know, from the dead, and that when Dorcas says, you know, I'll tell you tomorrow, you know, as she's about to die, I think that is a very profound understanding that Toni Morrison has about how, you know, we do often believe in that line across life and death. You know, we have James Van Der Zee's Harlem Book of the Dead because Toni Morrison, the editor, birthed it into the world. We wouldn't have that book. We wouldn't have that Van Der Zee and the Van Der Zee we know now were it not for Toni Morrison in the day job. And, you know, in the Dorcas picture, in that Van Der Zee, the way he superimposed portraits of people in life, and think about, you know, the portrait that they, you know, keep Violet and Joe keep on their mantle after Violet steals it. But, you know, there's that representation, but it's also a way to cross the line to the dead, to call across to the dead, and to think about the ways that the dead and our dead can live so powerfully in our day-to-day. And so too, you know, the music lives.
Wow. Well, this has been a powerful hour to break open this book with you all. I really want to thank you for sharing everything you have, and also for diving back into the book on your own. And I know that you've shared with someone else that you're reading this book, and that alone, like, is the kind of thing that, though we aren't able to gather and listen to Dianne sing this song in front of us, you know, right now, but just her giving us that Toni Morrison remix right there for the first time she dropped. You know, or to frame us, you know, today, on this day, around the legacy she leaves and what she yearns for in writing a book. And maybe one of the main reasons I wanted this to start this way, this book club at the Kennedy Center, to start this way, is because much of what we think we understand about the music, we think we hear. And I do not believe that. I believe that Toni Morrison knows more than Miles Davis about a ballad, and that there's much for the audience to also understand about the literary aspect of how powerful a sound that has been birthed in this country and it's gone on around the world, and how it's represented in these books, in these poems, in these songs, in these lyrics, and that to trust them, you know, and to trust that you might be confused.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Yeah, the downbeat is coming.
Right.
It was such
back around.
Yeah,
and it
you
was
catch the
such,
next chorus.
and such a gift to be invited to go back in to the book, to go. I kept thinking every time I would go back in that, you know, this is the universe. And thank you also for, I mean, to be in the company of the two of you in this beautiful exploration, which I wish could go on all night, is a deep joy and privilege.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's good to see you again after all of these years. And it's good to see you, Jason.
Yes. I'm glad.
It's been allowed to be that long, and it's really, really nice to be here in this space with you.
Yes, and thank you, Kennedy Center, for hosting this. As you can tell, my job at the Kennedy Center is to try to fuse as often as I can. But I can't do that without in the lab alone. So it's, you know, just to collaborate with you all on trying to find something else in, you know, in the 7 changes of Joe Trace.
Right.
I keep thinking like the seven state, you know, like his 7 changes. It's like 7 steps to heaven. Then his 8, he kills somebody.
Yes.
Right. Anyway, we could go on and on. We won't.
Right.
We will join again in August to discuss Life of an Ex-Colored Man with Mark Turner and Dr. Imani Perry. Thank you both again for joining me this evening. Blessings, and have a good night, you all.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right.